Well, you didn't think we were going to skip the morning pit on Thanksgiving, did you? I know it's Thanksgiving, but of course we're still going to do a morning pit. I mean, the reality is, as you guys probably know by now, I record these things day ahead, right? So I taped this one yesterday. So even though it's Thanksgiving, to take Thanksgiving off would be not having the morning pit tomorrow, right? Because then I wouldn't do one today. But tomorrow's the morning pit mailbag, so we have to do one. We have to have one for Friday, right? So here we are, the Thanksgiving Day morning pit, which of course is taped the day before on the biggest party night of the year. We're not partying during the morning pit here on Thanksgiving morning. Anyway, it's happy Thanksgiving. I was going back and forth about what to do for today's morning pit. I mean, we covered some big topics already so far this week. Some of the keys to beating Boston College. We talked about that on Tuesday. Talked about Pitt basketball and how they're going to replace Damian Dunn, I should say. Dame is what all the players and coaches call him, and sometimes you fall into that habit. But it's one thing to refer to him as Dame. It's another one to say Dame Dunn. I don't think Dame Dunn really works. If you're going to use the last name, you got to say Damian, I think. We can save that conversation for another day. But we talked a lot about Damian Dunn yesterday, about how Pitt's going to replace him for these 6 weeks while he's out. I actually had a good conversation with Jeff Capel later in the day about that. If you didn't see it, that video is right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We'll have an article about it as well, because some really good stuff from Jeff Capel on that topic, and a lot of topics, as always. Capel's really good. But covered some big news there, right? Like Monday, we talked about everything from the weekend. Tuesday, we talked about the keys to beating Boston College. Yesterday, we talked about what Pitt's going to do without Damian Dunn. So, excuse me, I was trying to think about what to do today. Like, what should we talk about here on Thanksgiving? And I thought we could go super corny and, let's talk about all the things in Pitt sports that we are thankful for. But I don't want to do that. I mean, first of all, I'm not going to sit here and say, you know what, man, I am thankful for Ben Sauls. It's not really like that, But I did think maybe today, since it is Thanksgiving, rainy, cold Thanksgiving, but Thanksgiving nonetheless, maybe we could just have like a good vibes episode. Like, look, I know you're not happy about the fact that Pitt has lost 4 games in a row after starting 7-0. I know that you're disappointed about it. You probably, or probably a decent amount of you think that Pitt's going to lose to Boston College on Saturday and then lose it again in its bowl game to turn 7-0 into a 6-game losing streak to finish 7-6. I think, or maybe 7-5 and just decline the opportunity to even play in a bowl game. I'm sure there's a lot of you. I shouldn't say a lot. There's probably some of you who think that. And I get it. I get being disappointed about a 4-game losing streak. But the more I thought about it, and I got out the old legal pad to write it down, I think there's a lot to like. I think there's a lot to feel good about with this football program as they sit here nearing the end of the 2024 regular season, heading toward the off season ahead of the 2025 season. I think there's a lot to like. I think there's a lot to be positive about. I think there's a lot to be excited about. And so for today, we're going to try to avoid the negative. We're just going to have a good vibes episode of the Morning Pit and talk about some of the things that actually have been good today. And you can listen to it or not. It's up to you, whatever you want to do. But it's Thanksgiving, man. We can take a little bit of a break from some of the negativity. All right. So here on Thanksgiving, we're going to talk about some good things about Pitt football from the 2024 season, which still has 1 game left. 2, if you include the bowl. We'll talk about some of the good things from the 2024 season here on the Thanksgiving Day edition of the Morning Pit on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yes, Thanksgiving. It's the Morning Pit, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We always ask you to do like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That way you don't miss any of our Pit video content, our daily morning Pit videos, our weekly live stream every Wednesday night, usually with me and Jim Hammett. But last night it was just me flying solo like the old days, kicking it like it was 2021 or something or whatever we started doing those weekly live shows. 2019, I don't remember when we started doing it, but it was a lot of fun. And then, of course, we'll have our post-game show on Saturday after the Boston College game right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We'll talk as long as we need to. Will we go 3 hours like we did last year after the Duke game? I don't know, but we'll talk as long as we need to cover all the topics from Pitt, Boston College. All right. So if we look back at this season. All right. And if you just set, and you can't set the 4-game losing streak aside, but just for a moment. All right. And think about some of the things that you've seen this season and what they mean for this year, what they mean for the history of Pitt football, and what they mean for just Pitt football going forward. I think, the first thing that comes to mind for me, and I think it's easily overshadowed when you have the losses that they've had in the last 4 games, but the first thing that comes to mind for me, and one of the things, look, inevitably when we reflect back on this season, we're going to think about the losing streak, but one of the things that comes to mind, and one of the things that I think we will remember and reflect on, and maybe even more so because of how it stands in contrast to the losing streak, is some of the memorable wins that they were able to put together. Say what you will about Cincinnati. You can say they're good, you can say they're bad. It doesn't matter. Pitt was on the road, down 3 touchdowns with like 20 minutes left to play. The win probability was pretty damn close to 0, if not just a flat 0 right off the bat, or right there. And they manufactured a comeback. I mean that like you witnessed history. You know what I mean? Like that's the kind of thing that you can't believe, because no one thought they were coming back to win this game or win that game when they were down 21 with 20 minutes to go. A week later, they're down 10 with 5 minutes to go. And once again, nobody thought they were coming back to win that game. Nobody thought it. And they come back and win both. And one of them they do on the road against a team that you would not rank among Pitt's top, certainly not 3, not top 5, maybe not even top 10 most hated opponents. But there's just enough history with Cincinnati to make that one, just a little extra sweeter. They were getting on the West Virginia, ESP chant at Cincinnati, and, just going on the road, shutting up that crowd. Pitt has had some memorable games at that stadium. They've had some memorable games against Cincinnati. And in terms of the River City rivalry, the River City rivalry, that 2024 game, I think, adds to the legend of it. It really does. And then a week later, to get a 10-point comeback victory when you're down, to get a comeback victory when you're down 10 in the final 5 minutes, and to do it against probably your most hated rival. We can, without going down the path of debating West Virginia versus Penn State, I think we can all agree there's a significant amount of hatred for West Virginia. And West Virginia likely felt like it had the game won. On the road, up 10, 5 minutes left to go. Giving West Virginia a 2-game win streak in the renewal of the series and some extra bragging rights with a double-digit win on the road until Pitt came back and pulled it off. That's a memorable win. You'll remember MJ Devonshire with the pick 6, to win the 2022 game. And you'll remember Dejon Reynolds with that touchdown catch. You'll remember Nate Yarnell handing off to, who scored it, Derek Davis, to score the game when you'll remember these things because it was a huge game and a huge comeback against a hated rival. And then, you know what? The North Carolina game's memorable too. I still think back about the 2019 game against North Carolina when Pitt beat the Tar Heels for the first time since joining the ACC. Remember, that was a big thing Pitt just couldn't get away from. They couldn't get that monkey off their back of just beating North Carolina as a member of the ACC. They lost in 2013, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. The 2017 and 2018 teams were very bad. They were bad North Carolina teams. And Pitt still couldn't beat them. They lost in crushingly bad fashion in 2016 and 2015 and 14 and 13 with Ryan Switzer and multiple look, there was a long, sordid history against North Carolina, and they finally got that monkey off their back of winning a game in 2019. This year, they finally got the monkey off their back of actually winning a game in Chapel Hill. First time ever. You witnessed Pitt do something for the first time, something good for the first time ever in school history. That's memorable. That's important. That's a positive. I think when you move on and you look at some of the players who emerged this season, some of the guys who have turned out to be good players for Pitt this year and with the potential to be good players for Pitt in the future, and when you talk about positive impacts of this season and positive takeaways, I think the quarterback has to be one. Like, you can say what you want about how Eli Holstein played against UConn and Syracuse and SMU and Virginia. But I think on the whole, his redshirt freshman season has been a net positive by a lot. First 5 games of the season, he threw for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. Every single one. And sure, Kent State and Youngstown State were 2 of those 5 games. But the other 3 were Cincinnati, West Virginia, and North Carolina, with Cincinnati and North Carolina on the road. Like, that doesn't happen by accident. It wasn't like he just stumbled into it and had 300 yards and 3 touchdowns on the road at Cincinnati and at North Carolina. Like, the things he did in those games are indicative of who he is. What happened in the subsequent 4 games, Cal, Syracuse, SMU, a bit of Virginia, the subsequent 3.5 games, I think it's indicative of who he is, but I think it's also more indicative of his development and the fact that he's a young quarterback and that he's still growing and developing. On the whole, I don't know how you couldn't come out of this season excited about the future for Eli Holstein. I think he looks like he's going to be really good, and he has let all those epic comebacks and big wins and memorable wins that I just talked about. He's been the one leading the charge. He really has. And I think that's important. It's important for now, and it's important for the future. And I think that's one of the biggest, most positive takeaways. And you know what else? Desmond Reed was a friggin' revelation this year. I didn't expect much out of Desmond Reed. I don't know what you expected out of Desmond Reed. I didn't expect much. And that's no disrespect to him, but he's small and he came from the FCS. And so did I write him off or disregard him because of those 2 things? Yeah, probably. Was that unfair to him? Yeah, certainly. Was I completely wrong about it? Absolutely. Because Desmond Reed has emerged as one of the most exciting, explosive players to wear a Pitt uniform in I don't know how long. Like how far back do you go? Izzy Abanikanda was obviously very exciting and very explosive. Jordan Addison and Tyler Boyd were exciting, explosive players. But in terms of guys that every time they touch the ball, if they saw a little bit of daylight, they might be gone. There aren't many others that really come to mind in recent memory. I mean, LaShawn McCoy had some element of that. Desmond Reed has been tougher than expected. He's adapted to this level better than I expected, and he's been even more explosive than I expected him. I expected him to be explosive, but not like he's been. It's been a revelation to watch. It really has. Ditto for the linebackers. And I know I overhyped the linebackers for years. I've been doing it for years. And I did it this year. So I knew, I knew I was setting myself up for another blown prediction about Pitt's linebackers being good, but boy, howdy did it pay off this year. Kyle Lewis is very much on his way toward ACC Defensive Player of the Year awards, all ACC first team honors, and which, I meant to bring this up. I might not have my sheet. I have a sheet that keeps track of all the there it is. All ACC and draft picks under Pat Narduzzi, and the only all conference linebacker recognition, it's been one guy, Savracier Dennis. 2021, he was a second teamer. 2022, he was a first team selection. Kyle Lewis will be on the first team of the All ACC. He should be ACC Defensive Player of the Year, and he should be at the very least a consensus All-American. No other linebacker in the country has been more productive than him. I've talked about this for the past 2 weeks. I've written about this. I'm going to keep beating this drum. Even in the game at Louisville, he still had like 9 tackles and a tackle for loss. Nobody else is putting up the stat line that he has. He is the most productive linebacker in the country. And if he's not the ACC Defensive Player of the Year, if he's not first team All-Conference, and he's not a first team All-American, at least on a consensus level, then there is a major, major problem with how those honors and awards are selected. I really. He has been that outstanding. And I think I think it's always fun, to see when a player emerges like that, when a guy has a breakout season. Like the breakout seasons are fun to watch because, especially for those of us who have followed recruiting, I mean, you've seen these guys through the recruiting process. You got to know them in high school. You saw them in high school. They get to college. You're waiting for them to break out on the scene. They show a little bit as a freshman or as a redshirt freshman or a sophomore. They get more and more playing time. It keeps building up, and then eventually it clicks, and they break out, and they have that huge season. That's happening for Kyle Lewis, and it's happening for Rasheem Biles. And it's happening for Braylon Lovelace. Those guys are all having huge seasons, and they've all got eligibility remaining. Now, are they going to be able to keep them all? I don't know. Are any of them going to go into the transfer portal? I don't know. I don't think so, but I'm a pie in the sky, doe-eyed optimist or something like that, right? I mean, it's Thanksgiving. What else are we going to do? But if Pitt can keep that group together, they are going to have a big-time a collection of linebackers next year, even better than this year, because all those guys will be a year older, a year more experienced, and ready to make even more plays, I think. It's exciting to see breakout players like that. And that's not changed by the 4-game losing streak. It's not. Eli Holstein's potential is not changed by the 4-game losing streak. Desmond Reed's explosiveness is not changed by the 4-game losing streak. The breakout seasons by those 3 linebackers are not changed by the 4-game losing streak. And I'll tell you the last thing that's cool. And I bring it up because, well, it feels like there'll be fewer and fewer of these to bring up over the years. Long-term players. I said about breakout guys, when you follow recruiting, you get an extra sense of the breakout players because you've seen them since high school and all that kind of stuff. Same thing goes for the guys who stay around for a while. And it used to be, this was always the case. Everybody played 4 or 5 years, except the really good ones went to the NFL after 3. But we saw these guys and followed them since their junior or senior years of high school, all the way through 4 or 5 years of college. Until you finally get to senior day and you're like, wow, I feel like I've known that guy for about 7 or 8 years, if you follow recruiting. Well, I feel like those numbers are going to dwindle of guys that you have that kind of connection to because of the transfer portal and guys moving around. And when you look at senior day, the only seniors who walked, scholarship guys who spent their entire careers here, Gavin Bartholomew, Branson Taylor, Brandon George, P.J. O'Brien, Daniel Carter, Ben Sauls, and Jason Collier. Nate Matlack walked, transfer. Donovan McMillan walked, transfer. Keith Thompson walked, transfer. Ryan Jacoby walked, transfer. Kanate Mumfield walked, transfer. It's almost as many guys that have been here since their freshman year and guys who transferred in. And you know what? I appreciate those guys who've been here for a long time because we followed their stories. I was saying to someone, it seems like more and more you're going to have stories like, situations like Key Thompson or Nate Matlack. They were only here for a year. And so it seemed like nice guys. It was cool to have them around. Did we really get to know them? They were only here for a year. We maybe interviewed them 3 or 4 times over the past, in the time that they were here. They played a lot. We saw them in the field a lot, but do we know who those guys were? Kanate Mumfield had been here. This was 3 years for him. Donovan McMillan, 2 years, plus he was a Whipple guy, so we knew him a little bit. But for the most part, you don't really have that same kind of connection. Tyler Wiltz, a couple years ago, was here for 1 year. Kylan Johnson, right, the linebacker, 1 year. Phil Dracovic last year, 1 year. Whatever you want to say about him. Guys who maybe walk on senior day, and it's like, cool, you were here for a year. So I appreciate some of these guys who've stuck around. And whatever you want to say about Gavin Bartholomew, Branson Taylor, Brandon George, P.J. O'Brien, Daniel Carter, Ben Sauls, and Jason Collier, they were here. And they stuck it out. And I feel like, how many is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's 7 guys. I think a lot of years we might even see fewer, of guys who walk on senior day who've been at Pitt for 4 or 5 years. So shout out to them. It's fun to kind of follow those guys as they go through their careers and get to know them a little bit and figure out who they are, So none of this overshadows the 4-game losing streak. None of the things I've talked about here today are more important than the 4-game losing streak or anything like that, or make it so they didn't lose 4 in a row. They very much did. And that's the reality. But I think you can look at the season through a lot of different perspectives. Certainly viewing the 4-game losing streak as one, but you also saw this team get off to a 7-0 start with some hugely memorable wins and some pretty exciting players who broke out this year. So I guess it's not all bad. At least not for today. We'll get back to the bad vibes tomorrow. How about that? Can we promise on that? Can we work together on that? And if they lose on Saturday, we'll have lots of bad vibes on the post-game show right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Listen, like this video and subscribe, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I hope you have a great Thanksgiving. Enjoy the turkey and all the fixins and whatever it is you choose to do today. But I appreciate you making the Morning Pit part of your day. So thank you. I am thankful for you watching these videos all the time. Thanks for watching them all week. Thanks for watching them all month, all year, ever since we started this a couple of years ago, however long ago it was. It's always fun to do. So thank you. Have a great Thanksgiving. We'll be back with the Morning Pit mailbag tomorrow right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.